Hi and welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to look at the last one that's left out, the many-to-many relationship. Before we start many-to-many, there's one thing that I would like to show you with the one-to-many or the many-to-one relationship. This is something we did in our previous tutorial. We had a one-to-many relationship between the user object and the vehicle object, and we just added the at one-to-many, and what Hibernate did was, by default, it created a separate mapping table, and it inserted the IDs of both the user as well as the vehicle into that mapping table. And of course, it had a separate table for the user and a separate table for the vehicle. There is one other way to represent a one-to-many or a many-to-one relationship, and that is that the object on the many side of the relationship has a reference to the other object. So now my user table cannot have a column for the vehicle ID because one user can have multiple vehicles. But the vehicle table can have a user ID column because any vehicle will have only one user. It's a many to one as far as the vehicle side of the relationship is concerned. So I can as well have a user ID column in my vehicle table, and I can do the mapping there itself without having to have a separate table which has the mapping of the user and the vehicle ID. So in this tutorial we're going to have a quick look at that before we move on to the many-to-many. So what I need to do for that is first let me remove this configuration. Okay, so I have a one-to-many mapping for this one, which is a vehicle collection inside the user object, and now I have a many-to-one mapping on this side, which is the vehicle, the user instance in the vehicle object. Now what I need to do is I need to say that this needs to have the mapping of that relationship. So what I do is I go here, and in my one-to-many I have this property called mappedBy. And what mappedBy does is it says where you want the mapping to happen. I want the mapping to happen over here. This has to do the mapping. I don't want a separate table. So I say mappedBy equals user. Okay, once this is done, what I'll do is I'll go to the vehicle class, and here under the many-to-one annotation I will specify what is the join column. So I'll say at join column, and name equals, I'll give this a name, user ID. So I'm naming the join column that I'm creating inside the vehicle table itself. So once we put this annotation, Hibernate knows that the mapping is for this user and the join column is in this vehicle table. So instead of creating a new table, what it'll do is it'll just create a column inside the vehicle table, and it'll have the ID of the user saved here. So I will save both these classes, and let's run the test again. Okay, so here you can see it's inserted the user details table, username and user ID. But if you look at the vehicle table, it has three columns. One is the user ID, the vehicle name and the vehicle ID. These two were already there. Now what we have done is, instead of mapping the user ID with the vehicle ID in a separate table, we have done this mapping in the vehicle table itself. So this will have the relationship inside the vehicle table itself. Okay, so now with this done, we'll have a look at many-to-many mapping. Now, many-to-many is again, there's only one way we can represent the many-to-many. It has to have a mapping table, because assume a scenario where this is kind of a rental vehicle, and then a user can rent multiple vehicles, and the vehicle can be rented by multiple users. So in that case, one user might be having multiple vehicles allocated to that user, and then a vehicle will have multiple users. So you cannot have the mapping either in the user table or in the vehicle table. It has to be a separate table. So I'll remove these annotations here. We will continue to try, have this bidirectional relationship in this example as well. So let's remove these annotations. So here, just like I have a vehicle collection inside the user object, I need to have a user collection inside a vehicle object. So I will say collection of user details. I'll let the name be, okay, I'll call this user list equals new array list. So I've defined this new collection here. Now let me clear out the getters and the setters so that I can create new getters and setters. So finish the import and then generate getters and setters. Okay, so now there is a bidirectional relationship, and it is a many-to-many on both sides. So again, in order to configure it in Hibernate, it is as simple as writing a annotation many to many. And of course, the same thing applies here. So there is a many-to-many relationship on both ends. Now what we need to do is we need to change our test class. See, right now it's a set user, so this changes now. So this will probably be a get user list dot, okay, it's an add of user. The same way, get the user list and then add the user. Okay, now let's save and run this. Let's see what happens. Okay, so now what's happening here? we have a user details table which has the username and the user ID. Now the vehicle table has the vehicle name and the vehicle ID. Now look at what's happening over here. It has created two relationship tables. There is one called user details underscore vehicle and vehicle underscore user details. So what it's doing is it's having the same relationship. It's mapping the user ID to the vehicle ID in both. Here it's mapping the vehicle ID to the user ID. Now Hibernate does not know that it needs to just do one mapping. So it's actually doing two mappings. It's looking at user details, and when it is saving user details, it creates a mapping. And it looks at vehicle, and when it saves a vehicle, it creates a mapping. So we need to tell Hibernate not to do this. We need to tell Hibernate to map for only one table. Let's have a look at the data so that we get a clearer picture. Let's take the user details table. Okay, one user, fine. Now vehicle, two vehicles, which is also fine. Now if you query user details underscore vehicle, see it's mapping 1 to 2 and 1 to 3. Now if you query vehicle underscore user details, again you can see 2 is mapped to 1 and 3 is mapped to 1. So this is a redundant mapping. We don't need to have two different mappings. So what do we do to make only one mapping happen? So what we do is we just pick one of these classes. Let's pick the user details class, and we'll tell Hibernate that this class will have the mapping, which is it's mapping user detail and vehicle. It's user detail to vehicle. So user ID forms the first column and the vehicle ID forms the second column. So once that happens, what we do is we go to the vehicle class and we tell vehicle, same as what we did earlier, we say mappedBy equals, and this is mappedBy vehicle. So I will say don't worry about the mapping. I'm already being mapped by the vehicle of this thing here, which is the user list. So what it does is it just looks up the vehicle mapping. Now I'll save this, and now let's run this anyway. Let's see what happens if we run this. Run as Java application. There you go. The user details vehicle is the only table that is created because here this many to many is doing the mapping, and this many to many is not doing the mapping because we have told Hibernate that it's being mapped by the other class already, so you don't have to do the mapping. So this helps us to have only one table mapping. So Hibernate knows that okay, the mapping has to be done over here, and when it tries to look at the vehicle class, it does not do a mapping again. it knows that the mapping has already been done in the other class, which is the user details underscore vehicle. So it works fine. Now if you want vehicle underscore user details, it's just a change in the order of the columns, which really doesn't matter. But in that case, what you would do is you would change it in the user details class. You would say map by user of this object. So in that case, this annotation, this many-to-many annotation would take care of the configuration. Now again, the same configuration which we did earlier applies. Now you can go to this user details annotation. Here you can define what is the join table name, the join column name. It's as simple as saying add join column inside add join table. Now you would also have to do the same thing that we did earlier. You would have to have a join column and an inverse join column. So you're naming both the user ID column as well as the vehicle ID column. But note that since you have mentioned here that it's mapped by vehicle of the other class, your join table, join column configurations have to be inside this class, which is user details class, because this many-to-many is the one that's creating this table here. So that's how you create a many-to-many relationship between two objects. Now we have looked at all the possible combinations. We have looked at one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-one, and many-to-many. Now there are a few concepts here that are common across all these three mapping combinations, and we'll have a look at what those concepts are in the next tutorial.